So there's been something I've been thinking a lot about recently when it comes to rhetoric and policy, especially around this presidential campaign, and especially around my bickering online with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. And that is empathy, and the issue that is empathy when it comes to the left and the right. I sincerely think, especially around when you're seeing all this discourse around Matt Walsh's new movie, Am I Racist, is the issue of empathy, especially with the left. I think the left is driven primarily by empathy as opposed to any... it seems like they think empathy is a reason to solve a problem as opposed to the problems that could possibly be created by relying solely on empathy on policy decisions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Things like that. It's cliche as hell, but it's the reality of the situation. When you look at the transgender debate, it always comes down to, are you really that much of a piece of garbage where you just can't use the pronouns, that it's going to make someone feel good on the inside, as opposed to looking at the larger situation at hand and the fact that, I don't always agree with libs at TikTok, but some of the stories that come out of some schools are truly concerning in what's being put in front of small children, especially elementary school, let alone the entire K through 12 curricula. It's Democrats, especially, you see this also after anytime there's a mass shooting. Instead of making sure they're creating good gun laws that both sides of the aisle can agree on, they jump immediately to we need to ban assault rifles. AR-15 means assault rifle, so it needs to be banned, blah, 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 all this nonsense of just poor policy decisions and lawmaking. And on the other side of the aisle, I'll be the first person to call out my own side of the aisle. Anyone who thinks I'm some partisan hack that refuses to call out the other side has not been paying attention to what I put out there very, very well. And on the Republican side and the Libertarian side, they very much come across as heartless and having zero empathy for terrible things that may be going on in our society, things that are happening around the world. Their rhetoric around stuff can be truly atrocious when it comes to some of this. Going back to the transgender situation in our culture currently, they lack all empathy and insist on making pretty heinous jokes sometimes at the expense of these individuals that a lot of them have pretty severe mental health issues that are not being dealt with appropriately, and in my opinion quite often are being labeled as non-binary or transgender or something like that is a band-aid for a larger situation they may have going on. The over therapization of our society, I think, is truly a bad thing that we're seeing, where everything is trauma, while Republicans are saying, well, this terrible thing happened, I was beaten when I was a kid, and look how well I turned out. And yeah, you're heartless. Like, that's not ideal either. As always, there's balance. I get called a squish or wishy-washy when it comes to many things when it comes to culture, because I think there's levels to everything, and there needs to be a meet in the middle when it comes to a lot of stuff. I'm not going to be a piece of garbage to someone who I disagree with in the street. This is a big deal that I got really into a big heated back and forth with the @LPNH Twitter account. I'm pretty darn sure it was Jeremy Kauffman, though I could be wrong. But the LPNH account was saying if a Kamala Harris supporter goes to your door or knocks on your door asking for their vote, you should slam your door in your face. You should yell at them. You should just be a bad neighbor to these people. And in my honest opinion, I don't think that's how you get people to side with you. I think you want to get people to side with you. The whole point of politics is to find the meat in the middle and to get more people to understand your perspective and hopefully side with you when it comes to proper laws being made, as opposed to being some whack job activist. Like, I call out progressives all the time for that same nonsense, because they have this weird empathy for only certain people and ignore the reality of a lot of people in the rest of the country. They focus on the 2 to 5% of the population on basically everything and ignore the other 90-something% of the population. It's like a reversed 99% movement. They're focused on 0.5% of the population that's transgender, or the 3% of the population that's gay, or something like that, opposed to seeing what's happening with the rest of the country. I'm not going to go way in the weeds on that right now, because it really gets away from the message I'm hoping to get across, which is empathy needs to be moderated. You need to, guess what, create laws with empathy in mind, Republicans. But for Democrats, you need to also have it not be the sole reason you're creating laws. You need to create a good policy that's going to be good for more than just your one little group you care about. The reason, I'm thinking back to when I first got involved with politics and such, was during George W. Bush days, when the term was special interest groups were the enemy for people on the right, and it's kind of expanded in this large collectivist movement of the progressive left, and they've really gotten their act together. Unfortunately for Republicans, they've gotten their act together. You really need to think about the big picture and long run. The reason why I guess what, I'm on board with the conservative Supreme Court is they're less likely to allow more and more building up of laws and power for the executive branch. I'm hoping they start paring stuff back. They're going to allow states, in theory, be able to have a lot more control over what's going on, and that's important. And Republicans need to do better messaging on this. Yes, it's funny to make fun of people. Yeah, it's hilarious. It's the reason why comedians are siding more with Republicans on a lot of matters, is because of the freedom of speech issue that the left is not necessarily on board with quite often. I think we should be empathetic when it comes to people having concerns, and not just writing off everything as, oh, you're just some liberal hack that feels the opposite way from me on this whatever issue it may be of the day, because it changes day by day in our current society. The whole reason Joe Biden became really relevant in politics in this country is because he was seen as an empathetic guy. Whether or not it's real, empathy, a lot of it comes down to just, and I hate to say virtue signaling, but something to that effect, where you come across as a person to people, and he did a lot of terrible things to both sides of the aisle when it comes to lawmaking, but he was seen as the empathetic person, and Donald Trump has been seen as this heartless bastard that only cares about himself. I think he primarily only cares about himself personally. This is the big point I also want to make when it comes to empathy. I would have thought we started to learn our lesson post-COVID, because of course we don't. We forget about things 6 months after things happen, but I was hoping empathy lessons would be learned on both sides of the aisle coming out of COVID, but it became so polarized. Specifically when it comes to empathy, Democrats were overly empathetic towards people that could possibly get sick, and they became paranoid over it to a crazy extent that they lost their empathy when it comes to other things, like people dying in nursing homes, unable to see their loved ones, and alone with just nurses and doctors as opposed to the people they love. On the other side, Republicans were totally unempathetic and decided to just call lefties a bunch of communist freaks that are paranoid of the world. There were a lot of deaths in the alpha strain of the coronavirus. There's no way around it. A lot of people died in the early days of the virus. And to just write that off as people should not be afraid, that's a concern. On the other side, I think it was totally wrong for Democrats and many normal people in their country to ignore the civil rights that are guaranteed in our Constitution through that. And they should have been empathetic to the concerns of the right, that they are concerned that government overreach will not stop after such and such a vaccine or mRNA spike protein shot came out or anything like that. You have to be empathetic to the other side, and I'm so sick of discussing it, but I'll just say it because I always bring it up: abortion, because it's just a poster child of our political problems in our country right now, where Democrats are ignoring the empathy that conservatives have for the unborn baby and Republicans are not being empathetic to the concerns that Democrats have for the woman and her ability to deal with her situation, and whether it's paid for mental health care, which we don't have in this country, whether it's ensuring that they're able to afford to take care of that child. We don't have that in this country, for better or worse. I'm not saying one way or another when it comes to economics of it. But empathy needs to be taken under consideration for both sides of the aisle when it comes to the respective fights that are being made on policy decisions. It's just something I needed to get out. I don't know whether this rant means anything at all, whether it'll have I know it's not going to have an impact, but whether it's really going to make sense when it comes to how policy and law should be made in the future. But it's just been really bothering me, and I hope it bothers a lot of other people. Like, you need to be empathetic to the other side to a certain extent. You can't dehumanize them to such a crazy extent that they are this black and white enemy. That's how we got in this political situation we're in right now, and unfortunately, as I've been saying, it's not going to be fixed until the next presidential cycle. No way around it. We need new leaders, and we're not getting the best of us right now in DC. All right, NewEnglandTake.com. Like and subscribe. All episodes are also posted on all major podcast platforms. We'll talk to you soon.